Not everyone gets to begin the race at the sound of the starter pistol. Some people are already halfway down the track before others even hear the whistle. Some are born into supportive homes, wealthy neighborhoods, access to better education, and environments that are designed for growth. Others are born into chaos, poverty, instability, self-doubt, and systems that were never built with them in mind. This isn't about fairness, it's about truth. And one truth we often don't like to talk about is that starting late means playing by different rules. There's a moment in every journey where you realize how far behind you really are. Not just behind people, but behind possibilities, mischances, delayed awareness, lessons learned later than you'd hoped. It's a sobering moment. You wake up and feel like you're behind the curve in your career, your relationships, your growth. It feels like everyone else has already built a life while you're still trying to figure out where the foundation begins. That feeling is real. It's disorienting. But it's not a sentence. It's a signal. The one who starts late doesn't get the luxury of casual effort. They don't get to move at the same pace as those who had a head start. They can't take a break every time they feel tired. They have to move with urgency, not panic, but urgency. It's the difference between walking with intention and sprinting without direction. When you start late, everything matters. Every book you read, every conversation you have, every decision you make, each one carries weight, because you're not just progressing, you're catching up. But here's the thing that most people forget. Catching up builds a different kind of strength. When you're forced to compress years of learning into months, you become sharper. When you have to overcome twice the resistance just to get to the same place, you develop resilience. You train your focus. You refine your instincts. You begin to see patterns others miss because you don't have the luxury of guessing. You have to see things clearly, quickly, and move. I met someone once, let's call her Sarah. She grew up in a home that didn't encourage dreams. Her education was broken. She didn't go to college. She worked small jobs to survive. At 27, while many of her peers were buying their first homes or getting promoted, she was working the night shift at a gas station. One day, she told me she looked at the security monitor, saw herself on the screen, and realized I'm standing still and the world is moving past me. She decided that night not just to change, but to run. She began taking online classes after her shifts. She used her breaks to study business books. She stopped spending time around people who only talked about yesterday. She wasn't smarter than others, she wasn't faster. But she had fuel. Fuel that came from being tired of feeling like she was behind. Within 3 years, she had launched a small logistics company that now employs over 20 people. No investors, no mentors, just relentless, focused effort. When you start late, you can't afford to waste time complaining about the head start others got, because every minute you do, they keep running. What I love about stories like Sarah's is that they remind us of the truth that success isn't about when you start. It's about how you choose to respond to your starting point. You see, most people think the race is about speed. It's not. It's about endurance. When you start late, you build that endurance differently. You build grit. You build resourcefulness. You stop relying on luck and start relying on strategy. There's a trap we often fall into when we start late. We begin comparing our journey to everyone else's. But comparison is a distraction. It pulls us away from the one thing we can control, effort. And when effort becomes consistent, even the gap starts to shrink. Day by day, you close the distance. The ones ahead may slow down. Some of them may stop altogether because they've never had to push. They never built the engine. But you have. I've seen this again and again in business, in leadership, in life. The ones who start with less often become the most formidable, not because they were given more, but because they learned to create more. They were forced to figure things out, and in doing so, they became the kind of leaders who don't just follow systems, they invent them. Starting late teaches you to see opportunity where others see scarcity. It teaches you that success is not inherited, it's earned. Earned through sleepless nights, long weekends, and choices that no one claps for. But perhaps the most important lesson is this: the finish line doesn't care when you began. The result doesn't show your starting date, it shows your impact. It shows what you did with what you had. And often the ones who start late don't just catch up, they surge ahead because they learn how to run faster, think deeper, and care more. There is no shame in starting late. The only shame is in not starting at all. So if today feels like you're behind, good. That means you know what's at stake. That means you're awake. The path ahead isn't easy, but it is yours. And when you decide to move not out of desperation, but out of belief, you start to see something powerful happen. The late starter becomes the front runner. Not because they were lucky, but because they never stopped running. And that, more than any head start, is what ultimately wins the race. There's a fundamental misunderstanding we carry about success, that it's supposed to be fair. That if someone works hard, they should get rewarded. That effort naturally leads to results. But life doesn't work like that. Life is not a fair equation. It's a complex, messy balance between what we put in and what's already in place when we begin. Some people grow up with every advantage imaginable. They have safety nets if they fail. They have networks that open doors. They get second chances just because of who they know or where they come from. And then there are others, people who don't get the same kind of start. People who walk into rooms with no connections. People who have to prove their worth before anyone even listens. People who are told directly or indirectly that they're already behind. It's easy to get bitter about that. It's tempting to blame the system, the world, the timing. And while all of that may be valid, it doesn't help you move forward. The truth is simple when you start late. The equation shifts. Your effort must outweigh the entitlement of those ahead. You don't have time to coast. You don't get to figure it out slowly. You have to decide quickly, act intentionally, and move consistently. That's the price of catching up. That's the tax of starting late. But what most people don't see is the gift in that pressure. Because when you are forced to operate without entitlement, you become resilient. You stop expecting someone to hand you something, and you start creating it for yourself. And in doing so, you build something far more valuable than progress. You build character. I remember working with a young leader. Let's call him Dev. He joined a startup in a junior role, several years older than everyone on his team. He had taken care of his family after college instead of jumping into a career. And by the time he got to the company, everyone else was younger, faster, and frankly, ahead of him in experience. At first, he felt like an outsider. But then he made a choice. He decided that if he was going to be behind, he'd be the hardest worker in the room. He started arriving before the office opened and staying after the lights went out. He didn't ask for shortcuts. He asked for feedback every week, ruthlessly. He didn't wait to be told what to do. He found problems and solved them before anyone asked. And slowly, the gap began to close. People noticed, because effort has a volume, and when it's loud enough, it drowns out credentials. Within 2 years, Dev was managing the very people who had started ahead of him, not because he was entitled to the position, but because he had earned it. He didn't walk around with expectation. He showed up with intention. And that changed everything. That's the mindset shift required when you start late. You can't afford to believe that the world owes you anything, because it doesn't. But it also doesn't deny those who are relentless. The world may not give equally, but it responds consistently to those who keep showing up. Talent is nice. Timing helps. That's what compounds. That's what moves the needle over time. Starting late makes you think differently. It forces you to audit every minute, every action. You stop asking, what can I get? And start asking, what can I give that no one else is giving right now? That's where impact comes from. When your effort isn't driven by what you hope to receive, but by what you choose to contribute, you become irreplaceable. There's a trap that often catches late starters. It's the belief that they have to fake it to keep up. They see others move fast, and they try to match that speed without building the foundation. But speed without substance doesn't last. You might look impressive for a while, but when pressure hits, it falls apart. Effort, on the other hand, builds depth. It's not flashy, but it's solid. It's not exciting every day, but it's consistent. And consistency is what separates the ones who peak quickly from the ones who rise sustainably. It's easy to feel like you're invisible when you start late, like no one sees how hard you're trying, like your efforts go unnoticed while others succeed with half the work. But don't mistake silence for lack of progress. Growth doesn't always make noise. It doesn't always come with praise, but it builds. And one day, the results will speak louder than any introduction. That's the long game. That's what starting late teaches you, to play the long game better than anyone else. Because when you know the road isn't smooth, you prepare better, you pace smarter, you endure longer. And that endurance becomes your advantage. The ones who start early often burn out fast. But the one who starts late with effort as their engine, they last. There's a certain kind of pride that comes with knowing you've earned every inch of your progress. No shortcuts. No favors. Just relentless movement forward. That pride is different. It's quieter than arrogance. It's deeper than confidence. It's a sense of identity. You don't need applause because you already know who you are. That's what effort gives you, certainty. In the end, no one cares how you started. All they'll see is what you built. All they feel is the weight of your work. And if your work is built on consistent effort, if it's grounded in humility and hunger, it will last longer than any head start ever could. So if you've started late, good. That means you've already lost the illusion of entitlement. That means you're free to move with clarity. That means you get to write your story from a place of strength, not expectation. And if you're running twice as fast, it's not because you're behind. It's because you've got somewhere worth going. There's a heaviness that comes with realizing you're behind. It's not always visible, but it's there, sitting in the back of your mind, whispering reminders of what could have been if only you had started earlier. You look around and see people doing things you wanted to do. You see them getting opportunities you feel you deserved. You watch others win while you're still trying to catch your breath. And in those moments, a dangerous thought begins to take root. this isn't fair, and you're right, it's not. Life isn't fair. Some people start with more. Some people are handed things you had to fight for. Some people never had to worry about money or survival or belonging. You did. That's the truth. But it's not the whole truth. Because here's the thing. Resentment feels like armor, but it's actually a cage. It makes you think you're protecting yourself when in reality you're just weighing yourself down. It tells you you're right to feel angry, and maybe you are. But that anger doesn't move you forward. It anchors you to the past. And when you're already running behind, you can't afford to be dragging anything that doesn't help you run faster. There's a cost to carrying bitterness. It shows up in the way you work, in the way you lead, in the way you speak to yourself. It poisons your effort. You start to focus more on proving others wrong than on building something right. You become reactive, not intentional. And when your energy is fueled by resentment, you may still move, but you'll never move freely. I once worked with a man named Malik. He was brilliant, sharp, capable, and full of fire. But he had a chip on his shoulder. He'd grown up in a place where opportunities were rare. And when he finally got into a professional environment, he couldn't let go of the anger. He watched people around him, less experienced, less skilled, get promoted faster. He'd come to every meeting with a point to prove. He worked harder than anyone, but the energy was heavy, exhausting, resentful. Eventually, someone pulled him aside and said something that changed his trajectory. "You're not wrong," they said. "You've had to work twice as hard to be here. But your resentment is keeping you from going any further." But Malik sat with it. And slowly, he started to shift. He stopped focusing on the injustice and started focusing on his intention. He still worked hard, but now it wasn't to compete. It was to create. He didn't waste energy keeping score. He invested it in building something meaningful. And what do you think happened? People started to follow him, not because he demanded attention, but because he exuded purpose. He went from being overlooked to being indispensable. And not because the world suddenly became fair, but because he stopped letting resentment lead his story. When you start late, it's natural to feel like life has robbed you. But staying in that mindset turns you into your own thief. It steals your joy, it drains your focus, it turns your journey into a contest of comparison instead of a path of contribution. You cannot run twice as fast if your legs are wrapped in bitterness. You have to let it go, not because it isn't justified, but because it isn't useful. You don't get stronger by being angry at the people ahead of you. You get stronger by being grateful that you're still running. You get stronger by recognizing that no matter where you started, the direction you choose today matters more than the distance you've already traveled. And you get stronger by deciding that the only weight you'll carry is the responsibility to make your time count. That's the shift. When you stop asking, why did they get that? And start asking, what am I building? You reclaim your power. When you stop obsessing over the head start and start maximizing the moment you're in, you begin to grow faster than you thought possible. Every second spent in resentment is a second stolen from action. Every thought consumed by unfairness is energy lost that could have been spent creating something meaningful. And the irony is, many of the people you envy for being ahead are looking backwards too, terrified of being caught. But when your fuel is purpose, not pride, you don't run to chase anyone. You run because you believe in where you're going. The ones who started late and still made it, they didn't do it by being angry. They did it by being focused. They turned pain into discipline. They turned setbacks into systems. They didn't get caught up in proving their worth. They just showed it day after day until no one could deny it. Resentment makes you small, but clarity expands you. And clarity comes when you stop looking sideways and start looking forward. Not with envy, but with resolve. Not with bitterness, but with belief. You don't need to carry resentment to remember your story. You can carry wisdom instead. You can carry empathy. You can carry hunger. You can carry a vision that stretches beyond your limitations. And most of all, you can carry the mindset that being behind doesn't make you broken. It makes you different. And different is powerful if you learn how to use it. You get to decide what your late start means. You get to rewrite the narrative. You get to choose whether the weight on your back is dragging you or driving you. And you get to decide right now whether your past will be your excuse or your advantage. Because in the end, it's not just about how fast you run. It's about how free you feel while running. And freedom comes when you finally let go of the weight that was never yours to carry. The world doesn't reward resentment, it rewards responsibility. The moment you take ownership, not of how you started, but of where you're going, is the moment everything begins to change. And once you drop the weight, you'll be surprised how fast you can actually move. There's something powerful about starting with less. Not because it's easy, not because it's comfortable, but because it forces you to become someone others never had to become. When you start late, whether in your career, your dreams, your personal growth, you quickly realize that you're not playing the same game. While others are moving forward on a paved road, you're climbing up barefoot, carrying weight. That can make you feel weak. It can make you feel like you're always behind. But in reality, it's the opposite. You're just training harder. When you start late, you don't have time to waste. Every moment counts. Every choice matters. While others may coast on momentum, you're learning to generate your own. While others rely on convenience, you become creative. While others complain about stress, you learn to manage pressure without crumbling. That's not weakness. That's strength. That's muscle. And it's a different kind of muscle. The kind that doesn't come from having it easy. It comes from lifting more than you thought you could day after day. I once met a woman named Lizette. She started her first business at 42. Before that, she spent 2 decades working jobs she didn't love, taking care of her family, watching from the sidelines while others chased their goals. One day, she said, I don't want to die with ideas still inside me, but the world didn't roll out a red carpet. She had to learn digital marketing from scratch. She had to network while raising kids. She had to fight self-doubt every night. But she kept moving. She told me something I'll never forget. Because I started late, I don't take any of this for granted. That sentence says everything. When you know what it's like to go without, you learn to appreciate every inch of progress. That appreciation becomes fuel. It makes you work differently. You don't just want to win. You want to understand every step of the climb. And in that climb, you start to build muscles others never develop, mental muscles, emotional endurance, grit, clarity, focus, patience. Not because you were born with them, because life required you to grow them. Think about athletes. The ones who train under pressure, in worse conditions, in higher altitudes, they develop endurance faster. They adapt more easily. They respond faster to challenge. And when the race comes, they're ready in ways no one else is. Starting late is your high altitude. It's your resistance training. It's your invitation to become more than what you were expected to be. We all love stories of natural talent. But the truth is, most of the greatest performers didn't start with more talent. They started with more tension. They learned to work under pressure, to build their own discipline, to find solutions when resources were scarce. They weren't born ready. They became ready because they had no other choice. That's what happens when you start late. You don't get to skip steps, so you learn every single one. That knowledge becomes your edge. It becomes your depth. It becomes the thing that separates you, not just in how fast you go, but in how well you understand the journey. Starting late builds empathy, because you know what it feels like to struggle, to be overlooked, to be underestimated. You don't just chase success, you respect it. You don't just lead from the front. You lead from experience. You know how it feels to be at the bottom, which means you don't forget the people who are still there. That humility is a strength most early starters never learn. Late starters also develop a different kind of creativity. When you don't have access, you become resourceful. When you don't have a network, you build one. When you don't have funding, you find a way. That's not improvisation, that's innovation. Necessity is still the most powerful driver of invention. And when you've had to invent your path, it gives you a unique voice, a unique story, a unique level of problem solving that sets you apart in any room. This is something I've seen in leaders over and over again. The ones who started late don't move out of ego, they move out of intention. They don't waste time trying to look good. They focus on doing the work. Because when you've had to fight for your spot, you don't care about appearances. You care about results. That focus becomes a discipline. That discipline becomes a lifestyle. And over time, it becomes unstoppable. But here's the challenge. Those muscles don't grow overnight. You don't feel strong in the beginning. You feel tired. You feel behind. You feel like no one sees the effort you're putting. That's the part no one talks about. The loneliness of catching up. The silence of self-discipline. The grind that happens behind closed doors when no one is watching. But keep going, because while others are building quickly on weak foundations, you're building slowly on solid ground. While others are chasing attention, you're cultivating mastery. While others are running fast in the wrong direction, you're walking steadily towards something real. You might not see it now. You might not feel it yet. But every time you show up, you're building strength. Every time you keep going, you're building trust with yourself. And one day, that internal trust becomes your greatest asset, not the resume, not the degree. Not the approval, just the unshakable knowledge that you've already done the hard part, and you're still here. That's what makes you different. That's what makes you strong, not the head start, not the recognition, but the invisible muscle built through struggle, through late nights, through starting after everyone else and still refusing to quit. You don't need to be first. You just need to finish with strength. And when you do, people will ask how you did it. They'll think it was talent. They'll think it was luck. But you'll know the truth. It wasn't luck. It was muscle. We spend so much of our lives obsessing over when we begin. We compare timelines, milestones, anniversaries, birthdays, job titles, salaries. We treat life like a scoreboard, and somewhere along the line, we bought into the idea that the earlier you start, the better off you'll be. But what if that's not true? What if the timing of your start has far less to do with your success than the meaning you give to your movement? We love to romanticize early starters, child prodigies, entrepreneurs who made it big at 22, athletes who went pro in their teens. We hold them up as proof that success belongs to those who begin young. But the reality is, most of us don't get the perfect beginning. Most of us don't discover our passion at 12. We don't launch our dream business straight out of school. We're not handed clarity in a moment of lightning, bolt inspiration. We live, we stumble, we drift, and then one day we decide to begin. And sometimes that decision comes later than we'd like. Maybe it took you years to find the courage. Maybe it took losing something first. Maybe you spent a long time doing what was expected before you asked what was true. Whatever the reason, the result is the same. You feel late. You feel like everyone else is already miles ahead. And that's a heavy feeling. But here's what we forget. The finish line doesn't ask when you started. It only reflects how you ran your race. It doesn't carry a timestamp. It carries your character, your values, your contribution, your growth. It carries the truth about who you became in the process, not how long it took you to get there. I met a man named Elias, a carpenter by trade. He spent most of his life building homes for other people, never once believing he could build something for himself. At 53, he enrolled in night classes to study architecture. It was something he'd always wanted, but always put off, too busy, too broke, too tired. But one day he said, I'm not going to spend the rest of my life wondering what I could have done. People laughed. What's the point at your age? They said. You'll be almost 60 before you get your degree. And he smiled and said, I'll be 60 anyway. Might as well be 60 with a degree. That kind of thinking, that kind of focus is rare. It's the mark of someone who's not running for applause. They're running for meaning. That's the race that matters. Elias graduated. He became a licensed architect at 59. And now he designs affordable housing in the same neighborhoods he once worked construction. He started late, but he finished well. And no one asked him how long it took. They see the work. They feel the impact because the finish line doesn't care about the delay. It cares about the difference. This is what so many people miss. We let the timing of our start become an excuse for hesitation. We think we're too old, too far behind, too out of touch. But here's the truth. If you're alive, you're not too late. If you're breathing, you can still begin. The world is full of people who started young and never finished. And it's full of people who started late and changed everything. You don't need a head start. You need a direction. You need commitment. You need to stop looking at where others are and start looking at what you still have to give. Because the game isn't won by the one who moves first. It's won by the one who moves with purpose again and again, no matter how long it takes. The pressure to be early is manufactured. It's not real. It's a construct we created to make ourselves feel worthy by comparison. But comparison is a trap. It tricks us into believing that someone else's pace defines our potential. It doesn't. Your value isn't determined by how fast you move. It's determined by what you build with the time you have. Think of all the artists, inventors, leaders, and thinkers who didn't begin their real work until much later in life. They weren't behind, they were becoming. Their experiences, their failures, their time in the shadows, all of it was preparation, not punishment, preparation. And when they finally move, they move with clarity. That's what starting late gives you perspective. You've seen more, you've felt more, you've failed more. And because of that, you build differently. You're not rushing to impress. You're building something real, something sustainable, something meaningful. When we chase speed, we cut corners. When we chase significance, we build legacies. You get to choose which one matters more. The finish line isn't a ceremony. It's not a stage. It's not a trophy. It's the sum of your choices, the legacy you leave behind. It's the people you impacted, the values you lived, the integrity you protected, the effort you showed up with, even when no one else was watching. Starting late doesn't make your race less important. It makes your race more intentional. Because now you know the value of time. Now you're not wasting it. You're not sleepwalking through it. You're running with eyes open, heart engaged, and purpose burning. There is power in delayed beginnings. There is dignity in taking your time to become the person who is truly ready. Not just to chase success, but to carry it. Because success isn't about being early. It's about being ready when the moment comes. And when you've worked for it, truly worked for it, there's no imposter syndrome, no fragile ego. There's just earned confidence. You don't need to apologize for the delay. You don't need to explain your timeline. You just need to move, keep showing up, keep doing the work, keep becoming. Because one day you'll cross that finish line, not in a sprint, but with strength. And no one will ask when you started. They'll simply look at you and say, that's someone who finished well. And that's what truly matters.